Bienvenue et merci d'être venu à ma présentation, une exposé sur Raymond, Frenchy, LeDreau. Did you tell him I was going to be presenting in French?
No.
Alright. So I'm going to be talking, guys, about Frenchy, and namely some scandalous things that I have discovered in trying to do a little more research about him. I'll start with the basics, and this is going to be pretty rote, so if you guys have heard this or repeated it before, feel free to join in. But our story of Raymond Frenchy LeDreau, he was a fisherman born in France, who lost his wife, eventually moved to the United States, lost his wife to the Spanish flu, and in his grief moved out to Anacapa Island, where he would fish around the islands for the rest of his days. He would have lived out on Anacapa Island during Prohibition, so a lot of his catch he traded for water and wine. Frenchy loved his wine, and even though he was relocated several times from the islands by the United States Coast Guard or Navy, he always found his way back. And it wasn't until he injured himself pretty badly that friends encouraged him to finally retire to his little cottage off the coast of Santa Barbara. That's what we tell people. There are other details that some people throw in. I remember hearing from Garen that Raymond was actually a veteran of the First World War. And I never failed to mention that after I heard that from Garen. And I assumed that he was a veteran of the French side of the First World War. Now details get foggy, so I went to Islandopedia, which is a great resource for looking up anything island related. It's put on by Marla Daly. It is our Wikipedia for the islands, all things island related. And in looking at the Frenchy article, trying to remember a couple of key details, I stumbled upon the one source that's actually cited for the story of Frenchy, and I'll tell you a little bit about that source. That source is an article called The Three Old Kings of Anacapa Island. It's written by Merrill Carr Allen. He was another island character. He spent most of his life out on the islands. And he actually had a couple first-hand encounters with Frenchy and a number of other island characters, namely, at least in this article, he's talking about the ones that were significant players on the island of Anacapa. And in reading the article, The Three Old Kings of Anacapa, it's about 10 pages. I've got it right here. And I know Maria will be providing you with a link to it later. I do encourage you to read it yourself. But there are a couple of key differences I noticed in his retelling of the story of Frenchy versus the one that we tell the general public. Namely, Frenchy was an itinerant drunk of dubious origin, and ultimately we know very little key truths about him. Frenchy himself admits, the first thing that we usually tell people is that Frenchy had some sort of crazy idea that because he was so sad, he was going to go out and live on Anacapa alone, all by himself. That wasn't really the case. Frenchy was one of many fishermen who lived on Anacapa Island, not just out of some crazy notion, but they were gainfully employed at the time. The S. Larco Fish Company employed multiple old, semi-retired or injured fishermen to stay out on the islands. During lobster season, they would catch fish and lobster, and they would send boats down from Santa Barbara weekly to catch or to collect the catch that the fishermen had made. All that is to say that Frenchy was not some one-off kook who went out to the islands himself. It was a semi-common occupation. Frenchy's story himself varied a lot depending on who he told it to and the state of drunkenness that he was in at the time. By all accounts, or by his accounts, he was probably born in France, and he did study to be a priest at some point, but eventually gave that up. He served not in the First World War, but rather in the Spanish-American War on the side of the United States. And our story about Frenchy and his wife, who succumbed to the Spanish flu, is probably not so correct either. Frenchy, if you pressed him enough, would admit to having a wife, and occasionally admit to having a daughter, and he would never say what became of them, only that his separation from them was very tragic and traumatic. Frenchy's name even is probably not all that reliable. Obviously, his real name was Raymond LeDreau, but that too, he had told people on some occasions was not his true name. His real name was a really long French name that meant nothing to nobody in this country, and he had redubbed himself as Raymond LeDreau. He did spend 25 years on Anacapa Island, and he was relocated by the Coast Guard multiple times, but his divorce from the island is not quite as cut and dry as we make it. Frenchy didn't move to Gull Island because the Coast Guard kicked him off. That was actually the S. Largo Company did that as sort of a punishment for him. Frenchy did in fact love his wine. He loved anything that got him sauced, and he even went out of his way with another fisherman he was working with at the time to try and make his own homebrew hooch out of dried fish and sugar and water. And one day came down to assist some school teachers who were rowing ashore for a picnic. Him and his friend ran down to the beach in their underwear, their long johns, 3 sheets to the wind, and that was so horrific an experience for those teachers that they sent in a complaint to the S. Largo Company, and he was relocated to Santa Cruz Island. And he wasn't immediately relocated to Gull Island either. He was relocated to a camp with multiple fishermen, a couple different camps actually. At one point, he told the it would have been the Stanton family at that time. He argued with the Stanton ranchers that they were not raising sheep correctly, and so he was moved to a different location. And then he got in a fight with another fisherman where, let's see, something about a fist and rock fight with another tenant of the island. And only at that point was Frenchy exiled to Gull Island camp by himself. Ultimately, our final retelling of the story of Frenchy is pretty accurate. He was sort of permitted to stay on the island after a couple of relocations, or failed relocations rather, from the Coast Guard. But I discovered that our story of Frenchy is pretty far from the truth of what we know of Frenchy through primary sources. So ultimately, the question is, what do we do with this, or rather, so what? In spite of everything I've just said, I don't actually think it's our job to be telling people the 100% accurate story of Raymond LeDreau. Of course, we serve as education for people, but also we serve as entertainment. And Frenchy in particular is a pretty unknowable person. Even in his own time, no one knew the real 100% true story of Frenchy. Since reading The Three Old Kings of Anacapa, I have changed my presentation on Frenchy somewhat. But ultimately, I don't really think of it as a story about Raymond LeDreau, or whatever his real name was. I think of it more as a sort of introduction to the island, a relatable story about a person in recent history that can be a springboard for any number of things, from sea caves to the kelp forests, or other recent history. My real takeaway, at least what I hope you take away for this presentation, is that we are interpreters. We interpret the history that we understand of the Channel Islands, and we have a whole bunch to talk about. We can talk about marine life, we can talk about human history, and we have to know a little bit about everything. We have to have a sort of jack-of-all-trades approach to things that people get PhDs in. And so we have to exist somewhere in between the cold hard truth and entertaining white lies. I know in my own talks about everything on the boats, I try to exist somewhere around here, but I definitely sway from one side to the other. This is not rather a single axis interpretive scale, rather there is a third point that you can reach. Aiden, do you know, obviously there are 4 mammals that live on the Channel Islands National Park. Do you know the 5th mammal that lives on Santa Catalina Island?
The bison?
A native one, sorry.
Oh, native.
One that was not introduced by people, but it is considered by biologists to be a native one.
Not here?
I'm calling you out. You
Yeah,
gotta
Aiden
get an answer.
exclusive.
What, humans?
No, you gotta. Best guess, come on.
Best guess. Is this an animal that I would have seen on Catalina?
Just say an animal. It's a mammal. Just say mammal. It's a little animal. Say a little animal.
Cat?
And that's our third point. Bullshit. It's a shrew, by the way. But ultimately, we are gonna get quizzed by people about things that we are not experts in, and we are gonna have to start to dabble in this area around here. We all come from varied backgrounds. Some of us have master's degrees. Some of us are anthropologists or biologists by trade. And we all have our own specific interests, things that we're going to focus more on, and inevitably we will be questioned about things that we are not experts in, or not even really that well read in regards to the island. Now, it's ultimately up to every individual listener and presenter where their balance is within this little triangle, but I would encourage you to avoid this corner. If you ever find yourself bored with your narrations or your talks, if you ever find yourself questioning whether some fantastical fact that you heard from another presenter was true, or you inevitably find yourself in the case of having remembered something that somebody said and then doing your best to fill in the details, I would encourage you to go out and do your own research. There are so many books and so many sources available online where you can go out and find out the truth for yourself. But thank you guys for listening. That's the end. Discussion now.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
Questions, Holly?
Are the dates accurate though? From like 1928 to 1956, and was he removed with a broken leg?
The dates. Go back to this. Frenchy first showed up in 1928, and he ultimately moved when he was 80 years old. I remember that. I have to look up the exact day that he. So 1928 to. It's somewhere in here.
I'm curious, where did you hear a broken leg? Where does that come from?
Yeah, that's probably a Highland Packer.
Interesting. No, it's just very interesting, like how his story has unfolded over such a long period of time. Not just through us, but through like NPS, through all that stuff. That's why this was so exciting, because it's like,
I mean, in honesty, it was named, the whole area is named Frenchy, because there was the sense that he had spent a lot of time there.
oh yeah.
He was definitely charismatic, and according to this article, the closest thing to the truth we have about him, he was friendly for the most part. Even the event that caused him to get kicked off the island was a result of him being too friendly.
And he had cats, Cat Rock on the south side.
Now, his cats
Yeah.
were actually left over from one of the other old kings.
Oh, okay.
They were Charlie Johnson's.
Uh-huh.
The fisherman the Scandinavian fisherman who came in to fill in his place after Frenchy was kicked out for a while. He ended up adopting 13 of Charlie's cats. Charlie only lived for four years before he died on the island. But he adopted Charlie's 13 cats, and after he moved off the island, he killed them all. Because,
Wait, Frenchy killed him?
yes, he gathered together the possession that he wanted to take with him and went about the sorrowful task of putting his 13 cats to death, telling Baby Boo, Fifi, and the rest that it was necessary so that they would not suffer hunger when he left them. He would feed them condensed milk in their own individual bowls every day. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not finding the date he left, but I know I saw 80 years old at time of departure.
What did you say his relation to the Stantons was again?
Oh, sorry. At one point, after he'd been moved to some of the S. Larco camps on Santa Cruz Island, the first time he was relocated was because he got in an argument with the ranchers at the time that they were not raising their cattle right.
Oh, right.
That he had some very strong opinions about how they could be raising cattle better.
I've got one. So, we kind of throw around, you heard people mention that the Websters tend, a lot of them stay there as an unofficial park ranger, quote unquote, for the island. Was there any truth to that?
Yeah, so as far as I can figure from reading this, H. Bay Webster is the first king mentioned in this story, and he did lease the island for a number of years. Was eventually outbid, and ultimately it was they leased it from the American Lighthouse, the Lighthouse Service of the U.S. government. He was eventually outbid. So what really happened was that outbidder of the Websters had that contract with the S. Larco Fish Company to station their fishermen out on the islands. Once Anacapa was no longer put up for lease and just outright owned by the U.S. government, they were sort of allowed to stay on as fishermen there, under the condition that they assist picnickers and visitors in coming ashore, and that they be presentable and friendly enough, which Frenchy, for the most part, usually was.
Isn't there some stories that Marla mentioned between Ira Eaton and Frenchy? Does that come across there?
It doesn't show up in this article, and she doesn't cite it in the Frenchy page on Ilopedia.
Any other questions? Okay, yay!